A very, very good evening, and thank you very much for your company as ever. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and make sure you hit the like button as well, because it helps boost engagement. And as you well know, social media aren't exactly champing at the bit to get our sort of opinions on their airwaves. Look, what a week it's been. I think actually you can quite clearly distinguish two-tier Britain out of everything that has taken place over the last week, and I'll explain more of that in a moment. Joining me tonight will be Alex Armstrong is away. He's taken some time off. He's recuperating from too much television. He's addicted to it, I tell you. It's like a sort of Gaza to the bottle he is to television. He's been doing great work, so I hope he's enjoying his time off. Replacing him is Elliott, who you may have met if you've been a regular viewer of Reasoned. If not, you'll get to hear his views. He's from up north as well, so sound, common sense lad, and hopefully you'll enjoy his company. Also joining me is Connie, who is, of course, a free speech crusader and a champion of women's rights. And speaking of women's rights, we'll get on to a bit more of that later with Sal Grover, who is a woman who set up an app. And this app, by the way, was marketed towards women. Only you're not allowed to do that in this day and age in the Western world, because guess what? A trans person said that this was discriminatory, and now she's facing a multi-million-dollar court battle. You won't believe it. And she's a superb person, and it was an absolute pleasure to speak to her, and Connie will have lots to say on that, of no doubt. And then, of course, you know Chloe Dobbs. She needs no introduction. Chloe Dobbs is the voice of reason on Reasoned. So she'll be joining us too. No doubt you'll have seen her all over this channel. Now, again, I repeat, hit that like button because it really does help us out. And if you can support us in any way, we're always after a bob or two, because, you know, it ain't cheap to run an outfit like this when you're pumping out as many videos as we do. But we hope that it's helping to actually inform, to engage, and to make you feel a little bit more sane in desperately lonely times. Common sense in the age of nonsense, my friends. That's what we offer here at Reasoned UK. Right, I want to talk about two-tier justice then, so let's get into this, shall we? Okie dokie diddly pokey. Now, the fact of the matter is here, my friends, what we have with the Sam Kerr case, who is a female footballer who plays for Chelsea, she was stood accused of calling a police officer stupid and white because she disagreed with being arrested for a ruckus in a taxi, in which the taxi was left worse for wear, shall we say, after her patronage. And she dismissed this officer as stupid and white, and then tried to flip it around and argue that actually the officers themselves were guilty of racism. Work that one out. If you can, you're a brainier mind than I. And the other story I want to talk to you about is a Muslim rioter who was on the other side of a riot in last summer's riots. It took him something like 56 days to come forward after being caught on CCTV throwing a brick as a missile. Now, I needn't explain to you countless scores of working class white men and women who have been banged up for social media posts, banged up for a whole host of things, who haven't got off scot-free. This fella did. So I think that you might be thinking, "What, Darren, how on earth are these two things linked?" Because, my friends, they sum up two-tier Britain, and I'll explain. Let's get into it. So, first up, have a watch of what Sam Kerr was like, how she acted with these poor officers.
But can you just come and pay for what the
I've listened to you a lot because I had no choice to, because you're a very loud person.
But can you not listen to the recording of the man?
But there's no recording.
You're more worried about his car than our two lives.
No, but the thing is though,
Yes, is that true?
Let's hindsight
You're
this.
safe from
Has anything
fine.
happened to you? No. You are going off of hypotheticals that could have happened. They didn't happen, did they? You do not know that man's intentions. You've just gone off a hypothetical of a scenario that has happened to someone else, and you're saying that could have happened.
Because she was
Which
saying
you're
that she
very
could have
true,
been
that
killed
could have happened. It didn't
by this
happen.
taxi driver.
But what we're saying,
what has happened?
hypotheticals are fine, but do you
Yeah,
think
but
it's
that-
okay
that's
that a
what-
taxi driver says, I'm not letting you stop anywhere and pay the bill? Do you think that's okay?
Because he was driving you to the police station, which is what
But
he's
do
done.
you, but
Do you
police
think,
station or not?
Do you think a taxi driver that's going to rape and kill you would drive you to a police station? No. you
You're
wouldn't,
sick.
would he?
You're honestly sick.
Well,
you were
I'm-
saying
I'm-
It's a
You're
good point.
You're literally a white privileged person. You're literally a white privileged man.
Okay, but you don't need to be racist towards me, do you?
No, you're literally, because we asked him to stop at
We
the
said,
point
please stop.
of please stop 5 or 6 times.
A million times.
What does that mean to you?
Well.
But then what is the point of
Can we
that?
talk to someone else?
Can we talk to someone else? Yeah, you're irrelevant.
Can we talk to one of you guys? Or
Can we
like,
talk
is
to
there
a
like
major?
person?
We want to talk to someone major. Because we're done. You're like irrelevant.
Okay, and so are you.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to talk to you anymore.
Alright, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm done talking to you anyway.
Cool. Yeah.
I'm assuming you two are dating because you did say that to me
Has
earlier, right?
no bearing
Can you listen to her, please? Because she's trying to tell you. I'm understanding what
I'm
you're
not
saying.
paying for some dodgy window. He deserves it. No, I'm not paying for it. I'll
I
sit
know.
here till 4 a.m.
Horrible,
in the morning
obnoxious
and get the
cow.
Chelsea lawyers on these stupid.
Alright, we'll call them then.
Yes, I'm
Wonder.
not taking the brunt of this because this guy is in the wrong.
What you could okay.
I'm not bearing down. You will take him.
We got two.
So it goes on like this, right? And then she says that actually he's stupid and white, and, you know, dismisses him that, oh my God, you guys are so fucking stupid and white. Now,
They hung up on us.
Okay, but they wouldn't do that though.
Oh my God.
They wouldn't do that. You should have spoken to
You
the
guys are stupid and white.
so right, if Jack Grealish, for example, right, or if we say a whole host of, I could list a countless number of Premier League football players. If white Premier League football players had got into a ruckus in a taxi and there'd been some altercation that involved a window damage in the car itself, let's not forget a taxi is a livelihood, right? That if that car is damaged, you lose potentially several days' work. If a white Premier League player had said to a black officer who had been given this Premier League player by a taxi driver at a station who was clearly acting like this, completely unreasonably, and said that the officer in question was stupid and black, do you think that actually there would have been this kind of nonchalant shrug of the shoulders? I really, really don't. Now marry this with the fact that today we get this story in the Stroke on Trent Live, in which a judge says that Ibrahim Mia had a very small involvement compared to others who've been sentenced for their parts in Anarchy. Anarchy being the riots that took place last summer in the wake of the murder of 3 beautiful and injury of 10 others in Southport. And he was masked. He was wearing a mask. He was caught on CCTV throwing a brick, and yet he was allowed off, and it had some sob story passed off in court, with the judge actually saying that, that small involvement part, and in my judgment, you did throw it further than needed, but not in the direction of anyone, and no one was hurt. You were wearing a balaclava, a futile attempt to disguise yourself if that's what you were trying to do. He didn't come forward until after being found out that he was on CCTV. He didn't come forward for 56 days. I just want to double check that number, but 50, if I get that right, 56 Yeah, 56 days after the August 3rd riot. So he handed himself into police on September 28th. Now, think, my friends, think of the countless examples that I've chronicled and others, countless examples of people being arrested for, I don't know, saying that the Southport murderer was a Muslim, or saying that they turned up to outside a mosque with a St. George's flag. That's one example. Or they shouted at a police officer. That's another example. I could go on and on all evening. It's littered with these examples. I know an 18-year-old who's in court this month who sent out a tweet, who is going through the process and has been reported by activists online and faces jail time, an 18-year-old. He didn't wear a mask, a balaclava, throw a brick, and be caught on CCTV doing it, and get off scot-free. Why is it that in the case of Sam Kerr and in the case of Ibrahim Mir, you find that actually your skin colour matters? You get diversity points. It helps you in the judicial system. That actually it's a get out of jail free card. And I say this as someone who doesn't believe these people should have been in prison. I don't want tit for tat. I just want equality, a level playing field. Because I bet my bottom dollar, I know for a fact in the case of Ibrahim Mir that everyone that was white that did similar things or even lesser offences than that was imprisoned, has been imprisoned, is in prison. In the Sam Kerr case, I don't think anyone should go to prison for a speech crime. She made herself look like a right arrogant arse, and she will suffer that for the rest of her days, and good. I don't think she should go to prison for it. But I do think that someone's life would be turned upside down if they were a white Premier League player that said that about a black officer. You see where I'm going with this. There are examples of two-tier justice littered across Britain today. This is Starmer's Britain. Starmer's attrition against us. Starmer's attrition to say that actually you don't matter. And that's the lesson that I've learned over the past 12 months. It really, really is. Fewer than 12 months. Only been since July last year, and it's been on steroids. Let me know in the comment section what you think. I'm going to see what my panel make of this now and go in to Grimes's Grotto. Hello, hello, hello. Oh, Elliott's hidden there, but hello, Chloe, and hello, Connie. There's Elliott there.
Hello. There's Elliott.
Now, I was sent this story by a very kind viewer who emailed me on my contact form and said, Darren, have you seen this? And it was just published there today, the 12th of February. And if you combine it with the Sam Kerr case, I mean, do you think that I'm onto something? Am I totally mad, Chloe?
I think that it is clear as day that we have two-tier policing and two-tier justice in this country. I don't think we need any more examples to be sure of it. The people who suggest that we don't have two-tier policing, I mean, they live under a rock. They've got their head in the sand. I couldn't believe when Nigel Farage, when was it, a month or so ago, he said something in Parliament and he said two-tier policing, and everybody just sort of laughed and giggled and sniggered at him as if he was some sort of mad conspiracy theorist. But I feel like we've just seen example after example of this being the case, and I think you're absolutely spot on, Darren, to say that if you flip the colours around and it was a white Premier League player in the case of Sam Kerr saying you're fucking stupid and black, that would be the end of their career and potentially jail time as well. And I think it's good for you to caveat the fact that you don't think that any of these people should be going to prison, but you just want equality. Because a lot of people, when they see us making points like this, like, oh, why wasn't this person put in prison? They say, you're a hypocrite. You said you were a free speech absolutist, but now it's only free speech when it suits you. But actually, we're just pointing out the fact that there are double standards.
Connie, I mean, you are young. Do you worry that actually this direction that we're heading in with, not that Chloe's old, by the way, but you know what I mean?
I was just going to say, Connie's the
yeah.
new young person. I'm the new
Yes,
old person on
exactly.
the podcast.
You're an OAP. Connie, though, do you worry about this, the direction of travel? Because there doesn't seem to be any pushback.
Pushback against people like Sam, you mean?
Pushback against the injustice of the two-tier element.
Oh, yes. I mean, I completely agree with, especially the point, Chloe, about if it was a especially a male footballer, their career would be over. Although you say that, and then there are footballers who have extremely serious allegations, and they're still playing. So I think it's hard to say. But yeah, I was really shocked when I saw the outcome. I could not believe that there's nothing been done to, there was no words of saying yes, obviously, and she even said in her statement that she said, maybe I should have expressed myself differently, but the message still stands. So she doesn't regret the message that she was trying to convey. She just thinks she should have said it in a more sensible way. I don't know.
Yes, yeah. And I actually think, that she should be reprimanded by Chelsea for just being so completely disgusting.
I mean, what a ridiculous, all of this stand up to racism in football. And when something like this happens, it's like, oh, poor her. She was put through a traumatic ordeal in a court case, and we're still going to support her all the way. Call her out.
Elliott, you aren't going to get yourself involved in a riot anytime soon, I don't think. But were you to, you can bet your bottom dollar that you'd fare better than Ibrahim Mia. Oh, Elliott, you're on mute. We'll come back to Elliott. But on that, the point of how do we actually get back to some semblance of sanity, Chloe? Because if you consider what's going on in Trump land, and we'll get to some of that in a minute, I want to talk about a little bit of what Trump's doing. But actually, I'll do that now, because this is, I think, as a consequence of Trump, Disney has ditched its diversity, equity, and inclusion rules as in those titles. If you start a Disney film, it'll come up saying The Jungle Book is racist because the depiction of King Louis, are depicted here on screen, and the jazz singing orangutan was intended as a racist caricature of African Americans. I mean, I don't know about you, but I watched this as a kid umpteen times, and I don't recall ever thinking that it reminded me of black people. That just didn't ever cross my mind. So these things, they push it on the agenda. But Trumpism is so anti this shit that actually it's been pushed out, and even Disney's recognising it's on a hiding to nothing.
Yeah, I think that the Trump effect is coming in thick and fast. He's already done so much with various executive orders and whatnot. And I imagine he's having, say, private conversations with the CEOs of various companies, whether it be of Disney or Facebook, etc., to say, you guys get your act in order, get rid of the woke crap, or else will happen to your company. And you say what's next for us here in Britain, and I think that we are starting to have pressure from Trump that is working, because we are now hearing that Starmer will have to water down the online safety bill, else be faced with Trump tariffs. So, Trump is very, very good at using his tariffs as a negotiating weapon. A lot of people are just looking at it as an economic tool and saying, oh, this makes no sense, it's bad for free trade, these tariffs that he's putting in place. But you shouldn't see them as an economic tool. You should see them as a foreign policy tool, a negotiating tool. He'll only put them into place if the country that he is negotiating with does not pursue the policies that he wants them to. And if it's the case that Trump forces Britain to be better on free speech, for example, and to govern effectively and to get rid of this two-tier crap in every part of our society, then fantastic. I'm not suggesting that Trump himself is going to manage to completely turn the ship around in Britain, but I think that he's setting
it's the right
precedent.
track. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It's the perfect parallel, isn't it? Connie, this question in from Jason, which you can see on your screen now. Jason says on Facebook, Darren, please ask the girls if they are frightened for their future, the future of their sons and daughters. Now, you are far too young to have a son or daughter, but the question still applies. Do you worry about their future if your future hypothetical children?
I think I'm actually quite optimistic. I do think the tide is
I
turning,
like
like you were
that.
saying, Chloe. Like we are seeing the Trump effect very quickly. I think we just need to continue not letting this, let the tide do its thing. Because I do worry that because of how quickly Trump has done everything, as much as I agree with it and it's great, I worry that because it's been done so quickly, he's obviously not going to have a second term. This is his last term.
Yes.
Is there going to be a backlash in the other direction at the end of all of this? So it's just very hard to say. If I was to have children right now, I would be terrified.
Yeah.
I would just like to think that I'd be able to distill as much common sense into them as possible. But I know so many TERFs who have children and they're trans, and the reason why they're TERFs is because they have seen what it's done to their own kids. So even people who are aware of how insane things are, struggle to shelter their own children from it. So it is a concern. But I think hopefully, if things keep going in the way that they are, everything will turn out fine. But we'll have to see.
Yes, and
Yeah, I think I'm.
sorry, Chloe. I was just going to say, in the reverse, though, the fact that there are those with trans children who simply cannot accept that they've made a mistake, because then you'd be accepting that you butchered your child for absolutely, you allowed your child to be mutilated in the name of ideology for absolutely, and they will never accept it. So in reverse, you've got the two phenomena there kicking off against each other. In another sign of pushback on this, though, the Free Speech Union had yet more good news. They are really leading the charge, and a woman called Christy Higgs, who was a school administrator, who was dismissed in 2019 from Farmers School in Fairford, Gloucestershire. She expressed traditional Christian views about marriage and sexuality on her personal Facebook account. And in a landmark moment for workplace freedom of expression, the Free Speech Union says the court ruled that her dismissal was unlawful, reinforcing vital protections for employees who express lawful but controversial beliefs. So the Free Speech Union argued that the case, intervened in the case and argued that the court ought to adopt several key arguments in the freedom of belief in the workplace. Now, the things that she said follow on from what we were just saying. The posts critiqued the introduction of LGBT plus whatever education in primary schools. Well, I would agree with that, and I'm a sodding gay man, so do I get cancelled again? Now, they included statements of warning of indoctrination and brainwashing of children. Higgs prefaced her repost with urgent calls to action, stating, "Please read this. They are brainwashing our children." Now, the words, this was just sharing of a post. Her association with the posts that she was sharing with that caption made them the basis of an internal investigation at the school. She used a different surname on Facebook and didn't identify the employer, and the school determined that her views could damage its reputation. She was subsequently dismissed for gross misconduct. The school fully captured. And she said, "I'm discriminated against because of my strongly held Christian beliefs." Under the Equality Act, which, as you'll know, Maya Forstater won a case in which she argued that her view that sex is immutable and you are either born a man or a woman is protected or to be gender critical, is protected in the Equality Act under philosophically held beliefs. And she won that case. And now this case has been argued on a similar basis via the Free Speech Union. But it does show a trend of pushing back against this stuff, if not a complete collapse of it. Doesn't it, Chloe?
Yes, I think so. And in terms of how do we fight back against this wokery, I think it is definitely speaking up online and people being brave to show people this is a normal opinion. We can't just sit in silence. But I think that also the legal side of it is very, very important. Schools and other institutions need to know that if you engage in this wokery and you A, brainwash kids, and you B, fire teachers and members of staff for not agreeing with your opinion, that's going to result in a big legal battle that's going to cost you a lot of time and money. So you better not do it. So I think that the legal side is important, and well done to the Free Speech Union for
Again.
doing this. There was also, I need to sign up actually. There was also
Oh, you
another
do?
story I
100%.
saw on. I know there was also another. I keep saying I'm going to do it, and I keep forgetting. There was also another story on the GB News site today about a teacher who was kicked out for misgendering. Someone has now been given the opportunity to appeal. So let's fingers crossed hope that that teacher is able to get their job back. So things seem to be moving in the right direction. So when you asked us about what do we think about the future of our children, and Connie said she's quite optimistic, I'd say I'm tentatively optimistic. I feel like things are starting to move in the right direction. I mean, if things remain as woke as they have been recently, then my view is very much that I would only have children if I could homeschool them. I absolutely will not put children through a woke education system that brainwashes them. Absolutely no way in hell.
Yes. I mean, Connie, I've contradicted myself, haven't I? Because I've gone from saying that I'm deeply pessimistic about the two-tier nature of the country, but then actually the wins that we are seeing through Trump and through the Free Speech Union and others, it shows that there is a pushback. So we're not dead yet, Jim.
No, but the thing is that so these are the cases that have managed to get profiles, and that the when these things happen to these people, for example, this teacher, and for example, me in my own experience, I knew about the Free Speech Union, and I'm assuming that this teacher knew about them as well. But the thing is that it's still happening to people who have no idea about these organisations, and so the high-profile cases might fill us with hope, but that does not mean that it is not still going on in the corners of institutions, and those ones are just lucky that whoever they're persecuting for their beliefs unfortunately aren't aware of who they need to go to. And so until more people start speaking out and actually going to get the support that they need, we might think that the tide is turning sort of in the public sphere, in the sense that these are the stories we hear about, but that is not to say that it is not still going on and will still go on sort of behind closed doors privately. I know I've had so many students in touch with me saying that they've had a similar situation. I said, well, do you know about the Free Speech Union? They're like, no, what's that? It's like, well, you could have fought that as well if you'd had that support, and I was just lucky. So
Yes. Yeah, well, I agree with that. Oh, sorry, that's me typing to Elliott to try and help him with these tech gremlins. But yes, a note for optimism all the same. Right, okay, now moving on. Kim Ledbetter. Now, I don't know if either of you have got opinions on this, on the assisted dying bill, but Kim Ledbetter, the sister of the murdered MP Joe Cox, a Labour MP, and a proponent of the assisted dying bill. Now, she has received some pretty fierce criticism over recent days, as she's promised everyone in Parliament, look, if you vote for this assisted dying bill, I promise you that there will be a High Court judge that signs off on each of these decisions to terminate someone's life. And you've even seen Labour MPs argue that it's discriminatory if we pass this legislation without allowing prisoners to do it. Well, prisoners have a right to healthcare, but they don't have a right to terminate their own lives. Otherwise, what's the penalty? If you're doing a full term, you might want to kill yourself. So they've been on quite the red herring recently. But here's what she actually argued, that in Right to Life put together this example of her promising a High Court judge to safeguard this legislation.
There is a perception around the slippery slope concept which actually isn't reality. and it would have to be signed off by a High Court judge. A High Court judge is involved in the process. We're involving a High Court judge in the process. There'll be a High Court judge, and that wouldn't just be a tick box exercise. The judge would speak to the doctors, be reassured that all the process had been followed.
And a judge to check that you are not being exploited.
Go to a High Court judge.
Go to a High Court judge to make.
Judge, you've got the High Court judge.
High Court judge. Does a High Court judge would have to rule each time a person makes a request.
Sign off by High Court judge.
High Court judge.
To a High Court judge to make.
Judge has got to approve it.
Then it has to go to High Court judge. So all of this will be tested.
So checks and balances, and then it would have to go to a High Court judge to add an extra layer of safeguarding. It will be the most robust piece of legislation in the world. There is a perception around the slippery slope concept which actually isn't reality. There is a
Well, it is now, my love. And she argued on the BBC. She said some oversight is better than none. Well, when it comes to, allowing granny or a terminally ill person to go off and be murdered by a doctor, I'm not sure that actually you can have just a tinsy-wincy bit of safeguarding. They're going to put together a panel. Who knows what the hell this panel's going to consist of? I just think if you sell someone a lie like that, then you're on pretty icy ground. If you tell people vote for this legislation and then we can scrutinise it and make sure that the safeguards are robust, only to then get rid of the safeguards. Even if I don't know either of your opinions, to be honest, but even if you are both advocates of the legislation, I think you could surely admit that right now the safeguards are not the promised safeguards from a month ago, Connie, I'll start with you this time.
Well, yeah, it's quite an embarrassing U-turn on that aspect. I mean, I've always, in principle, been in favour of assisted dying, and I find it very sad that family members risk being prosecuted themselves by helping their own family members who obviously truly do want to end their own life if they're taking the time and going through that whole process of going to Dignitas, for example. But the more that I have listened to the debate, it's made me far more aware of the fact that, yes, when you get to an age where you're potentially not wanting to live anymore, the chances are your ability to consent might have been reduced. And so it is quite I mean, yeah, at the present state, I do not think this legislation is something that should be supported, even though in principle, I have always been in favour of the idea that someone should be able to legally end life. I mean, the one thing that is ridiculous about this whole thing is that at the moment, it's obviously suicide is not illegal anymore, but it's still illegal to help someone to commit suicide. So it's like, if we're going to make it illegal to help someone commit suicide, then it's strange that the action itself isn't illegal. So it's illegal to help someone commit a legal act. I think that's where the law is extremely confusing. And so I think there does need to be reform, and I think people should have the option. But of course,
reform, choice words.
And of course, there should be safeguarding and very careful oversight of these things. I'm not personally against it entirely as a
I thought that might be the case. Younger people that tends to be their view. I am against it. And it's not on. I do hold faith, but it's not on a faith-based argument. It's just on the argument that I think that the slippery slope and that the abuse of the legislation, I think, will happen. And the judicial activism within the sphere as well to expand the legislation further, that happened pretty quickly in Canada, for example. So I'm deeply concerned that you're going to see people with anorexia, for example, being able to terminate their lives because they say that it's a terminal, a completely life-changing illness that will be with you till the end of days. Well, I don't ever remember being told that having anorexia, although the actual impacts of starving yourself could kill you, that actually it's classed as a terminal illness. I think that's a redefinition of the illness itself, Chloe.
Yeah, I mean, that is just crazy to extend it to people with anorexia. And with so many different debates, I've done debating in school, and it seems like almost every single motion we debated, there was some way that you could apply the slippery slope argument. But, if you applied the slippery slope argument to anything, then no changes, no legislation would ever be made if you always thought that the worst case scenario was going to come true. It's always very difficult to recognize when a slippery slope is actually going to come to fruition. And the good thing in this situation is that we are not the first country considering this. There are other countries that have brought in assisted dying, so we can look to them to see, will we actually go down a slippery slope if we bring this kind of thing in? A bit of a mixed bag on this. In some countries, yes. In some countries, no. There are very strict safeguards in place, very strict conditions as to when this can be used. It's not something that's used super often. But the cases that you point out in Canada do give me reason to worry. And given that our healthcare situation is such a mess at the moment,
Exactly.
I don't think that it is a good idea.
Because palliative care, end-of-life care doesn't exist in this country. Basically, it's so bad.
Well, this is the thing, is at a time when the NHS is on its knees and they are desperate to do anything to save money, then I worry that this would be abused. So I think that it is the wrong time. I think that we can potentially, if we manage to sort our NHS out, I pray that we do at some point, so that when I get to old age, it is actually possible to get an ambulance if you're dying. We can have a debate about it in the future, but I don't think that now is the time. This specific debate about whether the High Court should be involved or not, I imagine what has happened here is that Labour decided for themselves that, the High Court is going to have to sign off on all of this. I expect that the courts have now gone to Labour and said, are you out of your mind? We are up to our eyebrows with cases. We've got so many people on long waiting lists to see the courts for other things at the moment. We have absolutely no way in hell that we can deal with every old person that wants to end their life as well. It's not going to happen. I expect that that's why this decision has been made. So it may not pass at the next stage. And there were, I think, a lot of MPs who voted for this, who were not 100% in favour of this, because they wanted to see all the different conditions that would be placed, all the safeguards at the final stage. They wanted to see what amendments would be made and what not. So, I mean, Lee Anderson, for example, was chatting to him the other day. He said he voted for it last time, but he thinks he'll probably vote against it this time because now he's unsure about it. So I think you'll probably see quite a lot of people switch, and it may not pass.
That's interesting. That is interesting, actually. Karen says, Swipe actually has a funny one. After 5 years of Labour, I can imagine the queues for assisted dying would be pretty big. Karen says, I'm on the fence of assisted dying. There would have to be so many safeguards. I understand each side, but I'm not sure. And of course, Karen, those safeguards have already been thrown out the window. And Pom says, save NHS money, reduce pensions, assisted dying bill, what can go wrong? I'm afraid that actually I think some people do have that view. And after we saw Andrew Gwynn, the Minister for Labour, be dismissed after he was exposed for talking about how he wishes one of his pensioner constituents would pop her clogs, that this is a view shared by some on the political left. And Michael says, in Canada, the homeless were pushed towards it. And Pom says, the Canada version went well, not. And then Kearse says, I would like to have that choice, but the system could be open to abuse. And Victoria, there are already assisted dying measures in place. This is seeking to broaden the net. And Kearse says again, I don't trust anything under Starmer's government. Elliott, you're far too young to die, thanks be to God. But where do you stand on this?
Yeah, I share the same view as Connie, actually. Like, well, it could be, I think, abused. And I see a comment in the chat there from Michael Hancock saying they will view anybody who's unemployed or old as surplus. That is a bit extreme, but I mean, look, in the world we live in, I don't know what is extreme anymore. No. We've seen with immigration, that's been sort of abused. Even the benefit system, you can get benefits for anything now. So yeah, I do think that this can be abused, and especially when it's actually someone's life directly that's been impacted by it. I think it's better to stay on the safe side, and for me personally, I would be totally against it for that reason.
Yeah. Well, we've got a mixed bag here tonight. That's good. I like that. That's a bit of diversity. Can I co-opt the language of the left?
This
Probably
show
not.
is DEI on steroids.
Yeah,
How
it
could we
is. It
possibly
is.
be considered anti-woke?
Right. Okay. Moving on. From Kim Ledbetter. Labour and DEI. I said earlier DEI was on the death spiral. Well, it is in corporates around the world who are primarily based in America. But in Britain, folks, Labour have got it on steroids. Plants, woke plants. Did you know woke plants exist? Well, Labour have committed themselves to decolonising Kew Gardens because apparently it's a horrible, fascist, bigoted hellscape. The government has recommitted itself. DEFRA were asked in a parliamentary question session why Steve Reed, the trustee of the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew, needs to have skills in equality, diversity and inclusion. Apparently Labour said this is critical for a fucking garden centre, effectively. And excuse my French, Minister Mary Cray clarified that equality, diversity and inclusion, Mary Cretinus more like, equality, diversity and inclusion are a priority for this government, as they were under the last. Now, I'll give her that. That is a barb and a good dig, and I'll give her it. She's a Labour minister, but I'll accept that the Tories did exactly the same thing, a plague on both their houses. DEFRA wants Q's board to continue to have skills in those areas. I don't know why you need DEI again for a glorified garden, basically a greenhouse. For example, one of a beautiful greenhouse all the same, but a greenhouse nonetheless, to increase the numbers of visitors to Kew from underrepresented communities, whilst another is to train the next generation of plant experts in DEI. Why do they need the bloody sitting there playing with plants all day? Why do they need to know their DEI from their elbow? Attracting a wide range of people to a career working in and with nature. Again, this goes back to the stuff that we've seen in the past with the National Trust or, walkways saying that they're racist because there aren't enough black people represented on walks and paths. It's barbaric. The 10-year plan includes a pledge to decolonise the plants collection by acknowledging and addressing exploitative and racist legacies. Its director said a priority is making sure people do not feel intimidated by the Victorian wrought iron gates of Kew. At the moment, we have too few role models from minority backgrounds. Intimidated by a fucking gate. They're not going to lock you in. It's, as I say, it's a greenhouse, effectively. A pretty greenhouse. You ain't going to get locked in for being black. What the hell are you talking about? This is the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. At the moment, we have too few roles from minority backgrounds, and you could no longer say plants were discovered by Western botanists. Well, no, but you could argue that the Westerners were the ones that actually chronicled and were able to print and spread the word about these plants and bring them to Western nations, could you not? Just wait out till they find out about invasive species, it says. Well, this goes on. Forgive me because there is more. The NHS, they've spent £210,000. This is just one NHS body, by the way. This isn't the whole of the NHS. NHS Health Research Authority, they spaffed £210,000 on diversity schemes. Wes Streeton said that he would make Britain a life sciences and medical technology superpower. But over the past 5 years, the Health and Research Authority has blown £209,000 on DEI, ramping up from 7,869 in 2019 to a staggering 61,116 in 2024. Remember, this is a Conservative government, a 676.8% increase over just 5 years. Again, I reiterate, a Conservative government. At the same time, last year, 71% of internal complaints weren't completed on time, and every single third-party complaint remained unresolved past deadline by the authority. For the cash spent on DEI, you could order 3,553 bowel cancer tests, buy around 1,048 microscopes, 4 senior user researchers at the HRA. And Guido conclude the taxpayer may have a view on which should be prioritised. I bet you I can guarantee which one the taxpayer would rather we prioritise as well. But it just says that, again, a plague on both their houses. You know, this idea of a coalition between the Conservatives and Reform, Elliott, I'm just like, when you look through this stuff, obviously it's worse under Labour. Yeah, we gathered it would be, but it was still bloody bad under the Tories.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think more and more now this deal that was being spoke about before between the Tories and Reform is just getting further and further away from being a reality in 2029. Just purely for the ideological purposes, it's pretty clear to me now that Labour and the Tory party are virtually the same overall. I mean, maybe they'll argue about some small things, but overall they're the same. That the uni party is the word that people use to describe them. And I think Reform doing what they're doing now, which is especially from the leadership, like Zia saying that this deal is not going to happen. People associated with the party saying it's not going to happen, and I think that's the right way for Reform, because if they start to align with this nonsense, they're going to lose votes basically, I think, and they're going to stunt the growth as well.
Connie Lammy says it won't be long before Kew Ferns are holding diversity training and the Daffodils unionise.
Look, I think I haven't heard about this story, but it wasn't only a few days ago when Wes Streeting said that he did want to get rid of some of this rubbish. Is that the word that he used? Some of this rubbish? So I think
it was something to that effect,
like
yeah.
He might, perhaps there's a silver lining. I think perhaps, at least Wes Streeting, I mean, I think out of all of them, he seems to be a glimmer of hope. But in terms of the Tory party, yes, they were extremely well. I mean, they tried to, Theresa May tried to pass self-ID through the back door. But I think, again, I know you guys don't like Kemi Badenoch. She was shocking at PMQs today. But again, I think she is a glimmer of hope. And yes, she might not be doing the right things, but she does at least say the right thing. There's no way that the Tory government, I don't think, would be doing things like this. I think they're far beyond that now.
Well, they did, though, Connie. They did. The figures that I read out. Yeah.
I know, but like Kemi would say, it's new leadership now, and I think she has been very impressive on the way that she has withstood being accused of, she gets called transphobic, she even gets called racist, even though she is a black woman. But she's happy to say that not all cultures are valid and
equally
equal.
valid, yeah.
So I think it's unfair to still criticise the Tories currently. I appreciate this happened in the last government, which the last 14 years, which yes, they were woke, but.
Chloe Pom says we need a Doge in the UK, which is the Department of Government Efficiency in the United States under Elon Musk.
Oh, we absolutely do, for sure. I mean, I really hope that if Reform get in 2029, that Nigel Farage will learn a thing or two from his mate Trump and his maybe mate or maybe not mate Elon Musk, who knows these days, because I feel like we're in this just death spiral in the UK where we just keep on taxing people more, we keep on spending more and more government money, and it doesn't seem to go anywhere. I heard Christian Nemitz from the IEA talking on some podcast the other day about how if you look at France is not a laissez-faire economy. It's not like a free market economy. They have pretty high taxes, pretty similar to ours. But there, the money that they get from taxes is actually used quite well. Like the infrastructure works, the trains work.
In France?
Yeah, and also the streets are heavily policed. I was in Paris last summer, and you had
Paris is a shithole, Chloe.
No, when you see, I thought it was from just the videos you see on social media of a few dodgy bits, but in the centre of, and when I went when I was younger, it was definitely worse, but now you go around the centre of Paris and there are like police everywhere, they've got guns on them, like you do not step out of line because you will be in trouble. It was very well policed, their healthcare system works far better than ours. They are taxing people a lot.
That is true.
But the money is actually used, whereas here it seems like all of our infrastructure, public services are falling apart and we just keep on taxing people to death, but the money just seems to go down the drain. It's just not being used very well or efficiently at all, and we cannot keep going this way forever. It's just we're going to fall apart. So something needs to be done to make sure that the money that we take out of people in tax is used much more efficiently than it currently is. I'm fuming about Kew Gardens because that's just around the corner from me, and I do have a membership.
Beautiful.
So I'm going to write them a letter and tell them that I'm going to ask for a refund on my membership and cancel it
Good for
if
you.
they do this woke DEI crap. I mean, I'm sorry, but the gates, I've never looked at the fucking gates when I go past Kew Gardens and gone, oh my God, I'm so terrified of those gates because they're Victorian. I didn't even know they were Victorian. They just looked like bloody gates. It's ridiculous. And also, I'm sorry, but looking at some plants and some ferns isn't like something you must do for your, it's not like a human right. I'm sorry, but you're not really achieving that much for society by making sure that you make seeing the pretty plants at Kew Gardens accessible for every different minority. Like, who cares? It's just a day out to see some plants.
Elliott
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I've got to let Elliott come back on the idea that France is a shithole, because Elliott is actually part French, half French. And
Really?
yes, he is. He speaks fluent French. And I think Paris is a shithole, Elliott. Where do you stand on this?
Yeah, completely agree with that. Although in the summer for the Olympics, they did do a brilliant job of keeping it safe by basically moving out all the homeless people and all the sort of people loitering, kicking out students to let tourists stay there, as an example.
People loitering as in
did.
illegals or migrants?
Yeah, basically. The people who hang around the Eiffel Tower selling keyrings got kicked out.
I was there the week after the Olympics.
However, what I will say,
why.
spot on about the social, like the where the money is spent, like the social care over there is so much better. The healthcare system is absolutely amazing. I mean, when you go over there and you want a doctor's appointment, you just go on an app, you book it for the next day. You don't have to ring at 8 a.m. in the morning, get some sort of rude secretary telling you that you have to ring back the next day because there's no appointments left. So yeah, the money is definitely spent better and the people are well looked after. However, Paris is a shithole.
Keir says, who thought a garden centre would be so triggering? Victoria says, Chloe, love, you shouldn't hold back so much. You go, girl. She's taking the Michael there. And Michael says, come on, Chloe, how is Trans Steve in Somalia going to live without our money? And Christine says, Chloe, they're gates, plants, they're good for your mental health. Yes, Chloe wasn't criticising that. She agrees. She's a member of Kew Gardens. She's just saying that a gate can't be racist or inherently stigmatising in any way. Anyway,
you can walk around Richmond Park, round the corner, for free, and see all the plants and the deer there for free. Okay, if you go to Kew Gardens, there are plants and there are just some placards in front of them explaining them. Probably those placards will all be changed now to say how racist every single plant is. It is not essential that every single minority group and disadvantaged person living in this country is able to see the plants at Kew Gardens. It does not bloody matter. Get over it, people. There are more important things to worry about.
There are. Get a grip. Right. Okay. So turning to Europe, we've just been to Paris, but the rest of Europe, the Trump administration came out today with some announcements. They said that Europe cannot rely on US protection, and Pete Hegseth, who is the new Defense Secretary, said that America will focus on domestic concerns and the threat of China over sending peacekeeping troops to Ukraine. And on Ukraine, I think that's fair enough, by the way. Like, European allies are going to have to pay their keep and up their defence expenditure and stop maybe giving it to migrants and spending it on bloody DEI, on focusing on gates. And Trump and Putin have held talks to start an end to the war. My question on this, so Donald Trump held his first phone call with Vladimir Putin since returning to office and agreed to visit Russia. Pretty big. The US president said he and the Russian president agreed to stop the millions of deaths and start negotiations immediately to end the war. Mr. Trump said the pair discussed Ukraine, the Middle East, energy, artificial intelligence, and don't think Russia's winning the war there, the power of the dollar and various other subjects, and agreed to work together very closely, including visiting each other's nations. I can't quite see bad Vlad going to America, but maybe. He said the US delegation would be led by Vice President J.D. Vance, which is pretty big for him. He'll likely, I think, stands a very good chance of being the next president of the US. Of course, Donald Trump will go on a full 4 terms. A frequent critic of US military aid to Ukraine, and Marco Rubio, who is the Secretary of State, who is a bit more hawkish, shall we say, than JD Vance. But my question for you is one on Europe in general. There's been a free lunch from the United States of America far too long. And getting off your arse and spending your money on your own defence needs to happen. But the second question I have is, if President Trump, this early on in his presidency, right, he only got into office in mid-Jan, if he ends the war in Ukraine and there is a peaceful settlement, should he win the Nobel Peace Prize? Let's not forget that President Obama won the Nobel Peace Prize for saying he would intervene in Syria. And he didn't ultimately intervene in Syria, but he still won the Nobel Peace Prize. He got it given it before he'd even done anything. He just said he was going to do something and then didn't, and he got it anyway. So President Trump, if he does actually manage to win the peace in Europe, he should be the next recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. So those two questions. Chloe.
Perhaps. I have to say I'm no expert on what the terms are as to.
Well, clearly not very much if Obama won it.
For the Nobel Peace Prize. Well, yeah, if we're judging on that, then maybe he should do. People are a bit angry because Trump said, I think he said that he would end the war in Ukraine on his first day in office, and nearly a month later it hasn't quite happened yet. But, I knew that he was using a bit of hyperbole there when he said that. I'm very happy to see that talks have started, and hopefully he will be able to come to some kind of agreement here. And I hope it's one that both and being ambitious here, but both the left and the right will then be able to see, actually, this is a good deal. The bloodshed has ended. Because there is so much scaremongering around Trump. When I talk to normal members of the public who are not in our politics circle, and you mentioned Trump, the thing they all bring up straight away is they are absolutely terrified for the Ukrainians, because they know that Trump is going to hand the whole of Ukraine to Putin, and the Ukrainians will have their country taken away from them. They'll have no funding in Ukraine, and it will just be an absolute horrifying disaster. I really hope that he can prove to the left that that is not the case, and that he is a good negotiator, and that he will, he'll make sure that it is a fair deal for both sides where everyone can come out happy. That's what I hope, at least.
Connie, the Angel on the Hill on YouTube says Trump should have got a Nobel Peace Prize for the Abraham Accords, which is, of course, the reconciliation between Israel and states within the Middle East, Arab states within the Middle East, who, let's not forget, in the not too distant past, Israel has been engaged in war with, and yet they have these diplomatic relations now. It was a big thing. And that peace through strength, that's quite potent.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was something that I always loved to remind people of when they, slag off Trump all the time. So, well, actually, during his presidency, it was the most peaceful time ever, like when you compare it to others. But the Ukraine thing, I think, as from the UK's perspective, I think it will look like we've gone back on our word if we support any deal that gives any of Ukraine to Putin. And I feel like, as much as I agree that there should be an end to bloodshed, I think perhaps it does. Russia are going to make it look like they've won because Europe has given in, and the US, and given them whatever bit they might have got. I'm not saying that's necessarily what Trump is going to do, but I feel like that's probably the most likely outcome. But again, we cannot go on continuing in the way that we are funding this war. There has to be an end to it. So something has to be done, but ultimately, yeah, I think it is going to reflect poorly if Putin is given anything. But I feel like perhaps we're just going to have to take the L on that.
Yes, take the L. I think that's a youth phrase. I think, Elliott, that the Front National stance on this, the Alternative for Deutschland stance on this, they would all, on the right of European politics, they would all say that actually they agree that the land that Russia has taken, which Russia argues is Russia friendly, as in if they held a referendum and they said, look, I want to be part of Russia, not Ukraine, that they ought to keep them, and then we have peace and prosperity and Europe can move on. Is that where you are, is my question?
It's not where I am. Those parties, especially I know about the National Rally particularly because I used to obviously live there, but they were historically very pro-Russia. For example, Le Pen, met with Putin multiple times. Elected party members get sent over to Russia to verify the elections over there. And the same with the AfD. I mean, their main point of support for Russia is the energy policies and how it's cheaper.
Which was mad.
Which was, yeah. But no, I mean, I can't see Russia giving away what they've already taken because that would look weak. No. And we know Putin is not someone who, whether you like him or not, he's not going to step back and just say, yeah, fine, we've done all this fighting. We've been involved in the deadliest conflict since World War II and we're just going to give up everything we've won. Especially when his belief is that it's a historical aspect of Russia because of the Russian-speaking people that live in those regions. But look, I don't think that's going to happen. And even for Trump, I feel like he's kind of going to get stitched up because of that. Because if he makes a deal where they say, look, you stop the war, but you keep the land you've already got and you don't go any further, I think at this point that would be pretty good for Ukraine, if I'm being honest. But I feel like the left are going to start blaming Trump and saying, oh, well, you just let Putin take all this land and Ukraine have lost all this land because of you, when it's set up to fail, basically.
Interesting. Right, okay. I want to let you get your teeth into this topic. I touched on it a bit yesterday, but it's an important story. A court has, and this has been playing in the news all day today, and this is where we can talk about Kemi Badenoch's performance today, actually. A court has given Gazans the right to settle in the United Kingdom. A Palestinian had success after applying through a scheme meant for Ukrainians, the Homes for Ukraine scheme, and the people have argued that actually this is worrying because it could open the floodgates, and that's come from the Home Office, right, which isn't exactly au fait with border controls and robust words on border measurements. A family of 6 seeking to flee Gaza were allowed to join their brother in Britain after an immigration judge ruled that the Home Office's rejection of their application breached their human right. How many times must we hear that a person's human right has been breached, and therefore Britain's borders must be breached? Let's not forget that people in Gaza voted time and again for Hamas. All the polling suggests that they still support Hamas. They're supportive of what happened on October 7th to those Israeli girls, women, elderly people, and the rape that took place as well. Supportive. The Jews are dogs. And that's what they think. How would they feel about us as Westerners in this country? I don't want it to happen. I'm quite clear. It shouldn't happen with Pakistan. We shouldn't bring people from Pakistan here. We shouldn't bring people from Gaza here. We shouldn't bring people from a whole host of nations. We've got our own problems to deal with. John McTernan, he was an advisor to Tony Blair. He tweeted me last night and he said, well, Darren, have you seen Gaza lately? And I said, John, have you seen Britain lately? I don't want Britain to become the next Gaza. So Gaza, the judge in this case, so I mentioned there that a judge said, yes, of course you can come. The judge is the son of an ex-Guardian journalist who campaigns against Israel online. Now, the sins of the father aren't always the sins of the son, but my politics isn't a million miles away from my mother's politics. This is pretty normal. So could it be that this man has been soaked in Guardianista politics and that actually we've got an activist judge there, which of course there are countless examples of this taking place. And the latest on that is that Starmer stood up today and said this.
Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. I do not agree with the decision. She's right. It's the wrong decision. She hasn't quite done her homework because the decision the decision in question was taken under the last government.
That's disputed heavily.
Is already looking at the legal loophole which we need to close in this particular case. Mr. Speaker, let me be clear.
So they say they're looking into it. He blames the Tory government and says that this decision was taken under them. That's disputed. The Conservatives are disputing that as we speak. I heard that today. And the Telegraph, leading the charge on this, say that judicial review has to take place. So Keir Starmer said in that clip there that Parliament should be the one to make the rules on immigration. Well, it's in his gift. Parliament is sovereign. Now, thanks to Brexit, by the way, Parliament is sovereign. Parliament can make these decisions. If we don't want anyone from Gaza to come here, these Hamas supporters to come here, well, we have the right to legislate to make it so. We can legislate to bind a judge's hands so they can't make these decisions. We must do that because I tell you right now, the people like Owen Jones who support these people coming here, who support Hamas, or at least support the struggle of the people in Gaza, if not Hamas, they would argue that actually, of course, they should come here. What are they going to do when they suddenly have a load of people who don't support trans rights, who don't support gay rights, who don't support women's rights? Which one are they going to choose in this dicing with death scenario they've created for themselves? It'll be too late because then you'll end up like the state of Iran, in which, you know, the Marxists got into bed with the Ayatollah. And look how that turned out. The Marxists ain't alive anymore, folks. This is a scenario I foresee. So I'm deeply concerned about it. I'm deeply concerned about the judicial activism. I can't imagine Keir Starmer would legislate in this area, but if he did, even I, absolutely, the most dark, complete and utter, I reject Labour like you wouldn't believe. I hate everything they stand for. But if he did this, I would back him to the hilt and I would clap my hands once he did it. Who did I start with last time? Connie, yes, go ahead, Connie.
Whether he does it or not is another question. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not a parliamentary expert, but he didn't answer specifically about what he's going to, Kemi was asking, are you going to introduce legislation or at least amend the bill that deals with this? And he said, yes, we're doing something, but he couldn't say what. And he kept saying, I've answered your question, but he didn't actually say how he was going to do it. So I think it was quite, it was obviously just patronising and just political theatre to say things like that. But I agree with you, Darren. I'm very worried about the precedent that this sets. And the irony that the sort of people who would be happy to accept these people to come to the UK, we say it all the time, how ironic Queers for Palestine is. It's basically the same thing. But also, if we do start allowing some Gazans to come here and then they get citizenship, they may have relatives in other Middle Eastern states where they have perhaps even not just as similar as Hamas, sort of their views, but maybe even worse. So it's not limited to just Gazans. If the Gazans come over and then they settle, get citizenship, which is obviously very easy these days, and then they have relatives in other countries, that's opening the door to people from even more. It's it's not just the people in Gaza that could end up coming here. And I feel like a few years ago I would have been so scared to say something like that, but I don't think it's, I don't,
good for you.
when it comes to these things, you have to make generalizations sometimes when these people have been on a diet, as Julia Hartley-Brewer was saying today, on a diet of Hamas indoctrination. And if these people who are in favour of helping everyone who's suffered hardship in different countries, they just seem to think that as soon as their foot steps foot on British soil, that suddenly they're going to adapt to our socially liberal culture. That's obviously not the case, and we can see it happening now, but people just want to turn a blind eye to it and continue doing the same. It's not going to get any better. And also, think about how people go on about how the UK is funding a genocide, and Gazans are going to be aware of the fact that obviously we are supporters of Israel. They are not going to be happy with us. So who the hell knows what could happen after this precedent's been set.
Chloe, you are on Channel 4 every Monday at 9 o'clock with What's
They've
the name
actually
of the
just
program?
dropped the whole series. Go back to
Ah.
where you came from. They've actually just dropped the whole series on the Channel 4 player. If anyone wants to binge watch it in one go,
Go back
it's
to where
now
you
all
came
there.
from. I find myself saying that quite a lot. Go back to where you came from. Chloe,
The lefties are
in
not
your
going nuts about
experience,
that title.
they are. In your experience, you travelled all over meeting people who will be in similar situations to this family of Gazans coming here are. Where do you stand on, as Connie's just articulated, the idea that you do need to have a kind of blanket policy that says, I'm sorry, but we can't take the risk?
Yeah, I think at the moment, the way it is, when we assess whether we're going to approve someone's asylum claim or not, we just look at, how dangerous is the country that they are supposedly coming from, or how impoverished is the country that they're supposedly coming from. Now, when we live in a world where there are millions and millions upon millions of people, perhaps even billions, living in, absolute poverty in horrendous countries, awful situations, and we're only going to take in, if we are going to take in a small proportion of those people, why not be picky about which countries you allow people to come into Britain from? Okay, why not pick the countries that have a culture that is slightly more aligned with ours? Why not pick the countries where there is a lower chance of getting an extremist posing as a normal civilian? The reality is, as you pointed out, Connie, the Gazans have been fed a diet of Hamas indoctrination, and we have seen Hamas posing as civilians, and then as soon as the ceasefire was announced, they suddenly found their Hamas headbands again. I expect it's quite likely we would get people who are Hamas members claiming to be normal, nice civilians applying for this scheme, and the Home Office not realising that they are dodgy people. And even if we assume that everyone that comes here from Gaza is not an extremist and is not a Hamas supporter and not someone who's going to potentially go on to commit an attack, the reality is, even if they're not extremists in that sense, you make the good point about, about gay people, right? When I was in Syria, everyone that we met seemed incredibly lovely, and we were thinking, wow, the people here are so nice. We're absolutely shocked. And then I turned around and said to our security guard, okay, but what happens here if you were found to be gay? And he very quickly said, that does not end well for you. Okay, so it's the norm for them, and in Islam, homosexuality is a sin. Even fairly moderate Muslims support that notion. That's not an extremist point of view. Do you really want that coming to Britain when we've
Well,
gone
it is
through
in Christianity as well, but we don't kill them.
We
That's
don't
the
kill them.
difference.
So different. This point is often made, right? So Muslims will say, "Why do people say that Islam is an extreme ideology?" When, if you look at any holy book, there's dodgy stuff in all of them. The reality is that the Christian community have advanced their morality. They have changed. Modern Christians do not believe word for word everything that the Bible says. However, your average Muslim probably does still believe in the line of the Quran that says homosexuality is a sin. They haven't progressed in the same way that the Christian community has. So when someone points out an extreme line in a holy book, the question is not, is that line of the book extreme? Because you'll find that in every book. The question is, does your typical follower of this faith still believe in that? So it's definitely something to be concerned about. And also, we found that, as I said, most of the people that we met and we were interviewing were extremely lovely people, but then we were speaking to a lovely Syrian teacher, and he did tell us that there is still, amongst the general population, still definitely a lot of lingering ISIS ideology, because they were indoctrinated heavily. And that's something you've got to be concerned about. And I think the Home Office absolutely needs to start taking into account the potential impact on our national security. You're seeing more and more terrorist attacks happening. If you look at the map across Europe, interestingly, you don't see a single dot on the map in Poland.
No,
Well, I wonder why. They don't take in
Mm.
any illegal migrants. It's something the Home Office really does need to take into account. And people will argue against this, saying, "Oh, you're being racist. You're suggesting every Palestinian or every Syrian is a terrorist." No, I'm not. I'm just saying if you take someone from that country, there's a much higher likelihood than someone coming from Ukraine that they are going to be an extremist. It's just true. It's facts.
Michael says, look at the hostage releases that Hamas released. Do we really want them? And then Paul says, this country is already full. Don't they realise that? And Case says, I think we must accept that not all cultures are going to be compatible with British culture. Elliott, where are you on what's been discussed so far?
Yeah, no, I think a blanket policy would be something that would be good for this situation, and also other ones as well that we haven't mentioned. But I'm just thinking of all the groups that are going to be affected by these migrants that are definitely going to come in the next couple of years under this government, probably. Like women, for example, is the main one I'm thinking of. There's tens of millions of women in this country who are going to be at risk even further than they already are through the illegals that are here, to, a culture that does not respect women, doesn't respect gay people, and of course doesn't respect Jews either. So that's three groups straight away that are going to be at a massive risk of being targeted, attacked, harassed in the street, in their own country. I would put a blanket over that and just say, like, look, and also some other countries in the Middle East where there's a lot of terrorists, of course. But I think it's, there's no price on safety. You'd put as much money as possible to keep your own country safe.
Mm-hmm.
If you offend some people who don't live here, does that really matter when you're protecting the people who live here under your own nation? I don't think so. I think the people who live here are more important, really, than some refugees halfway across the world, no matter what the situation.
So why?
Yeah, and on that point on that point about safety that you make there, Elliott, just linking that back to our conversation earlier about how we pay huge taxes with the hope that we're going to have proper public services and we're going to have safe streets, right? People pay so much money to the state to make their country function, and very importantly, to make sure that their streets are safe and that if they have children, they'll be able to grow up in a safe community. People's taxes are not being used to keep the streets safe, when actually their taxes are being used to put up groups of, hundreds of men at a time in hotels. And someone, I can't remember who made the point recently, but if you take, 300-400 young men and put them in a hotel with nothing to do, they're not allowed to work, right? Even if they were English, they would get up to no good. They would start causing chaos in the community and start roaming around in gangs. What do you expect if you give 400 young men nothing to do, sat in a hotel on their asses?
Yeah.
And it's just not fair for the women. It's not fair for the women of this country. It's not fair for the taxpayers of this country. It's not fair on people who deserve to be able to bring up their kids in a safe society.
Why then, Elliott, though, did you have a criticism against Kemi Badenoch? Because she would argue she was raising these issues at Prime Minister's questions, and that actually, 6 questions she had Sir Keir Starmer on the ropes. I mean, where do you think she went wrong?
I mean, for me, it's just, I think the main criticism people have now is, like, it doesn't really matter who is the leader of the Tories at this point, I don't think.
Yeah.
Because, they're all part of the previous government, all the, prominent figures. John Nick's still around, even though he was the immigration minister when we had the most immigration ever. And they just lost all reputation, the credibility. And of course, just reform existing as well has just completely made them, like, almost, well, they're going to be made redundant pretty soon, I'm sure. One of the polls put them at 18%, which is absolutely insane. And I just think whatever Kemi says, it just doesn't really matter anymore, to be honest, in terms of the trajectory of the Tory party.
Yes. One of our viewers says, is this a re-upload? No, I can confirm we are alive and well right now. And Blade says, I'm sick of hearing pro-immigration arguments all the time. There are bad elements. And DJ reminds viewers to stop simping in the group chat, saying that the girls are beautiful. Yes, stop that behaviour. Now, well, you can indeed say the girls are beautiful, but you can't simp. Now, right, moving on. Fly
Getting
news.
lonely before Valentine's Day.
Yeah, oh, they probably are, yeah. It's Friday, isn't it? The Sly News posted this. Dangerous climate breakdown. Warning as the hottest January on record shocks scientists. Temperatures last month were 0.1 Celsius above the record set in January 2024. And it comes after a year in which temperature topped 1.5 Celsius, the target for climate negotiations for the first time. And I said, Sly News strikes again. The alarmism is off the charts. I had the heating on throughout January. In fact, I've got the heating on today. And as Orwell said, the party would ask that you forego your eyes, forego your ears, and to believe the truth and fact of the party. And the Met Office, one of my Twitter followers, Angel, sent, she's at Nobody Famous Yet, to give her credit, and she sent me this from the Met Office. January started with an Arctic to maritime air mass bringing cold temperatures to the United Kingdom as well as wintry showers, especially in northern regions. From the 4th to the 6th, a low-pressure system brought intensive rain, freezing rain, sleet and snow to the UK, with large amounts of snowfall in northern England and southern Scotland, while central England and Wales saw predominantly rain. High pressure, blah, 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 blah. Sutherland saw its lowest January temperature since 2010, with a minus 18.9 Celsius recorded on the 11th. It goes on, high pressure, and on the 24th, the 5th named storm of the season, Owen brought destructive winds to parts of the UK and a red warning, gusts of 90 miles per hour. Now, temperatures for the UK were below average, with the UK recording a provisional mean temperature of 3 degrees Celsius, 0.9 degrees Celsius below the long-term average. This is from the fucking Met Office. Where are Sly News getting their stats from? Their horrible, misleading, alarmist stats. I find that really, really grossly irresponsible. I mean, Connie, you were talking earlier about the kind of indoctrination of children. There are children today, the stats show, who are so scared of apocalyptic climate change that they have nightmares and can't sleep at night. This is just irresponsible.
Yeah, even today, I do a module on religion and mental health, and that's one of the things we're going to be learning about is the mass hysteria around climate change and people actually having anxiety disorders as a result. I mean, obviously, I am not, like you said, where the hell are they getting their stats from if some very reputable sources are saying the exact opposite of what this Sly News report is saying. I mean, personally, I remember at school, I really wanted to go to a climate protest, but it was only because loads of other people were going and we were getting a day off school. And my mum was like, you are not missing a day of school to go to London to and paint a nice placard to hold up and probably be around a load of people. I wouldn't do it, but all these people probably end up leaving all their rubbish anyway, which sort of defeats the whole point. But yeah, perhaps I'm a selfish person for not caring about the climate more, but I just think there are more immediate things going on in people's lives. You know, what do they expect to get out of headlines like this?
I think
don't
artificial
understand.
intelligence presents more of a threat to humanity than apocalyptic climate change does.
Yeah,
I really do.
but then the climate activists would say yes, they do, mainly because it uses so much energy to use AI. Have
well,
you
then I
seen
would say fuck
seen
off.
those pictures of all the water that is used?
Yes.
Just to generate AI.
And the electricity
Someone
and all
said
that.
in the comments the report blamed Connie's hairspray use.
She hasn't got lots of
I actually
hairspray on.
don't have any hairspray in. Okay.
Well, your curls are holding very well. Sadly, when I curl
It's
my
because
hair,
I did
the
it
curls
immediately before
disappear in
coming
5
on.
minutes.
So
It looks lovely.
it's not had any
Ignore these
outside
horrible
contact yet.
trolls.
Well, Elliott, the Daily Skeptic, which is headed by Toby Young of the Free Speech Union, sort of leads on. Obviously, these headlines from Sly News always leads to people saying, Ed Miliband, for example, playing on his little banjo, that's not a euphemism, thanks be to God, says that actually the climate alarmism means that we need to go full steam ahead with renewable technology. Well, the evidence is growing that onshore wind turbines are causing massive ecological damage, with increasing concern focused on the removal of a vast tonnage of insect life. For obvious reasons, it decimates area and insects get whacked by the big whopping wind turbine.
Wait, are the insects on the ground?
Well, if they're flying or climbing up the damn thing, but the flying insects were bees, flying beetles, and butterflies. Okay. All of them, bees being part of a really important part of the ecosystem. Now, for its part, the UK Natural History Museum offers a build your wind turbine kit for children. For all the family and the kiddies, they might get to whack a passing fly or a couple of moths, says the Daily Sceptic. But Reform have come out today and declared a war on renewables. They say that they will actually introduce 4 new net zero policies. The party actually says that they'll introduce a windfall tax on wind, but and get rid of the subsidy. And farmers will be urged to ditch renewable subsidies, with the party adamant that solar farms damage our food security. Obviously, if you're using prime agricultural land for these solar farms. They pledged to scrap the farm tax to save farmland, which is going to be used for these renewables. And the party warned farmers who continue to use land for solar panels would be subject to a special tax upon their death. Of course, that actually is what's going to happen. And the party said they would ban battery energy storage systems built along solar farms and has promised to force the national grid to replace pylons with underground cables. I'm not sure where I am on that, to be honest. Like, I think we do need pylons because we do need to increase electricity supply. But maybe if we just use gas, which is pretty clean, it's a lot greener than paving over most of the country with wind farms and solar panels. I agree with most of their policy here anyway. But Elliott, the damning, like the fact that they do cause environmental damage, the fact that Sly News are deliberately pushing this alarmism, the fact that you can go to the Natural History Museum and build your own wind turbine, kids are just being indoctrinated. The next generation are totally bought into this, totally captured. And maybe the only way out from this is the Reform Party, although Kemi Badenoch says that net zero was a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm still in education myself, albeit not not primary school, obviously. But even in my modules, for example, everything is brought back to sustainability in a climate change context. So everything's about meeting the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Whatever module it is, whether it's digital business, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's brick and mortar shops, it's everything that we are taught in university, no matter what you study, is to basically follow this narrative from Sky and from that other, I can't remember what the paper was called. But I'm really, really shocked to learn that there's kids that young that are being taught to make their own renewable kits.
I'm not, to be honest.
I mean, yeah, but it's just like, it shows that there's a clear agenda from a young age straight away to get this load of rubbish basically into their heads. And I saw a comment in the comments there saying that the turbines didn't have that long of a life. No. And that's true as well. Like, they need to be replaced pretty often. Like, they just don't work very well. Yeah. So for me, I think I like nuclear energy. I think that's one that works very well in France, for example. Mm-hmm. We buy energy from them, from EDF, and they use that and it works brilliantly. The bills are way cheaper over there for electricity. And they're also self-sufficient. So I think that's the way that we should go, rather than destroying our landscape, destroying our ecosystems.
Well, I agree with that, but of course, building nuclear takes time. So in the interim, we need oil and gas, and Ed Miliband is shutting down that bloody oil and gas.
Of course, yeah. So we could do it in the interim, then and long term look to build nuclear plants again, because they used to be, but they've been shut down.
Yeah, they've just come to the end of their life. Right. Okay. The last story then is this one. An NHS doctor has said that she is biologically female, and she told an employment tribunal that trans women have the right to get changed in front of female colleagues. So this is a man identifying as a female in front of an employment tribunal on Monday. If you can see a nice Adam's apple there. So Mr. Upton said that Sandy Peggy, a female nurse, hasn't suffered harassment as a result of being forced to share female changing rooms with this A&E doctor who is a male. And there were tense exchanges at the tribunal, and Miss Peggy's lawyer, the doctor, repeated the claim of being female and suggested that colleagues uncomfortable with a trans woman using female-only spaces held misinformed, biased, unpleasant, or bigoted views. The bullying of women continues, folks. The bullying of women continues. And again, this shows international total capture. So, Chloe, where are you at?
Well, I think as you can probably predict, I'm absolutely fuming about this. I just cannot believe that a man can have the audacity to tell women that, I can't remember the exact words you read out, but basically saying, you know, you're a horrible human being.
Misinformed.
For saying, yeah, misinformed. You're misinformed to feel slightly uneasy about a man getting changed in front of you and a man watching you getting naked. It's just messed up. I think there's just no sympathy from their side to try and to at least recognize the female worries, which are just genuine and completely commonsensical to me, and think
Rational,
about. Yeah, and think about some sort of solution that takes those into account. Whether that's, please, can you at the NHS, can you have, a private changing room, or can I get changed in like a disabled toilet that's got a changing area? Can we make that disabled plus trans friendly, whatever it is, right? Can they at least come to some kind of solution that takes into account the views of the women, rather than just saying, you're transphobic, horrible TERFs for suggesting that you want to get changed with only biological females.
Elliott, do you think that people will need, as in the Reform Party, if they get into power, that there needs to be a clarification in law of like a sort of Trumpian definition of sex?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, based on the way the party's going in terms of like following the line of what they're trying to do, I think that would have to happen. What I can't understand though is that you've got these woke feminists, right, who change their hair colour every week, change the social justice that they're interested in every week. Why are they so bothered about this when this is essentially denying the existence of like a real woman, right? Like it's saying that you can't, there's nothing that defines a woman, that anyone can be a woman, when that's just not true. And it's just really disrespectful in general to themselves, because they're women and they think they're fighting for women's rights, but they're actually fighting against women's rights.
Well, I mean, would you be happy for a female member of your family to get in a changing room with Dr. Upton?
No, definitely not. I mean, look at the Adam's apple there. You can see.
Yeah, yeah.
No way.
Come on then, Connie, the voice of reason on this issue. I've got to bring you in. It leads us this is why I chose this story as my last one, because it leads us very neatly onto the big interview tonight. But I wonder if you can see comparisons in the bullying by Dr. Upton and the bullying by Mr. Tickle.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many things with this specific case. I don't even know where to start, really, because not only do you have a man who knows he's a man, because only a man can be a trans woman, saying that he does have the right to get changed in front of females, but he is a doctor and he has stated under oath that there is no difference between male and female, or that the word female doesn't actually have a solid definition. This man is treating patients who doesn't believe that male and female are actually things as concepts. So that is kind of like a side issue to all of this, but the case itself is extremely typical of how these sorts of men talk to women. For example, when Naomi Cunningham, who is Sandy Peggy's KC, was asking him questions and using the word woman, he would say, I don't know what you mean by that. Do you mean a cis woman or a trans woman?
Oh, my
Trying to
God.
force the other side to use his language. And that's what they do. They don't because they know the trans ideology only survives as long as the language they're using is protected. That's why they hate it so much when people say trans women are men, because it breaks the spell. The only thing they have to rely on is policing people's language, because as soon as someone is able to freely say, no, he's a man, the whole thing, as Kelly J. Keane would say, the spell's broken. And so the fact that he is doing that under oath is, scary. But I think today went very well, according to reports I've been seeing, that Naomi Cunningham has been absolutely excellent the whole way through, but especially today. If the tribunal rules that, I see no way that the tribunal could rule in his favour. And if he does, that would be very worrying. But yeah, it's concerning. I saw there's a crowdfunder for Dr. Beth Upton, raising money so that after this ordeal is over, she can treat herself. It's not even to cover any legal costs or anything. It's literally, they've raised £1,500 so that he can buy himself something nice after it all.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
Did you guys see the story of the French gynecologist that has been
Yes.
suspended because they refused to treat a trans woman? They were like, I don't know how to deal with cock, so I'm not looking at that. And they got suspended.
I mean, that's another thing. I've just seen a comment about
That's horrific.
a lesbian.
I know.
This guy is also claiming that he's a lesbian, and his wife is now declaring herself as a lesbian. As far as I'm aware, not that it matters. It doesn't matter how much surgery you have, you are still a man. But I don't think he's had surgery either.
Well, the question, Connie, the question is, girls, if you knew a girl was a lesbian, would you be happy changing in front of her?
This is a classic argument that, oh well, if it's about sexual predatoriness, then you wouldn't want to get changed in front of a lesbian. If you look at crime stats and sexual violence, please let me know how many. Do lesbians disproportionately commit sexual offences? I'm not sure they do, but 98% of sexual offences are committed by men. So to say that we wouldn't want to get changed in front of lesbians is a ridiculous thing. Secondly, also, the whole point is that males are so much stronger than females that if a lesbian did try to sexually assault someone, another woman, we would be able to fight them off much easier than if a man tried to. There's something very different about a woman trying. That's why we let females box against each other and not, well, you'd like to think we wouldn't let males, although we do these days.
Well, yeah.
Box against females. So, you know, that argument is, it is a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, it definitely is. But I'm going to get on to more of that with Sal Grover, who Connie is a very big fan of, who has been through her own battle on this front, and we'll explain some of that. But it's a fascinating discussion, and we chronicle basically the bullying of women in this regard that is still going on today in Western democracies. So, guys, thank you very much for your company as ever. And Chloe, Connie and Elliott, we'll see you next time. Thanks very much, guys.
Adios. Thank you.
Bye.
Welcome to the hot seat, my friend. The seat that always feels the heat. No topic too controversial. Today we have a guest who knows all too well what it means to be in the heat of a battle. Sal Grover, the founder of Giggle, a social networking app designed exclusively for women. Can you define a woman? You probably can. Can our leaders? Not really. But most. Giggle really was at the heart of one of the most significant legal battles in Australia. It's called Tickle versus Giggle. Now, I'm not making that up. That is the name. I don't know if you remember from the thick of it, the UK political comedy in which Mr. Tickell was quite the menace. Well, this tickle is no different. In August 2024, the federal court ruled against Giggle, finding that the app indirectly discriminated against Roxanne Tickle, a transgender woman who was removed from the platform. Now, in a decision that stunned many, the court declared that sex is changeable, raising massive questions, of course, about the future of women-only spaces and sex-based rights. Now, Sal is appealing this ruling, arguing that it completely misinterprets the Sex Discrimination Act and could actually undermine sex-based protections for women and girls. But there's more to that. Crucially, there is a real human cost here. Tickle is now coming after Sal for legal costs. Now, that's huge, because if Sal loses, she won't just lose a legal battle. You know, it won't be a bruised ego. She'll be financially ruined. All for suggesting that this app should be exclusive to women, biological women, a fact and truth that we thought was immutable until only a few years ago. Imagine that. It's sick and it's twisted. So let's get into it, shall we? Sal Grover, welcome very much to the hot seat. Thank you for your company.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Now, listen, I think you're an absolute legend, but can we start with the basics for those that might not know? What inspired you to actually come up with Giggle in the first place? What made you think there needs to be this app that's exclusively for women? What was your vision, basically, for the app?
In a sense, I suppose it was kind of inspired by the Me Too movement. Like, whatever your thoughts are on that, I actually had experienced it. I was a screenwriter in Hollywood, and it's as much of a cesspool as everyone says it is.
Yeah.
And so I ended up going back to Australia and I was a very, very broken person from years of sexual assault and harassment. And I did a little bit of therapy just to sort of try and recover from it and get back to my normal self. And it was in that my therapist said, you really need a strong female support network in your life. And the moment she said it, it was this light bulb moment where I was like, I could think of all the different scenarios that would have actually either been helped or avoided if I'd had that. And so I was just talking to my mum one night. We were having a drink and going through it all. And she said, why don't we create an app for women, basically, so that, you have this sort of female support network in the palm of your hand, that no matter where you are or what you're doing in the world, there's sort of a female-only space available to you. And we sort of, it was only going to be a roommate app, basically, for women to find roommates and then create, like, basically have your own female in the space at home. And then we sort of started thinking of other things that women would want it for, and just sort of general conversation, lesbian dating, just emotional support, pregnancy, all those sorts of things that are either very specifically for women or just something that women would specifically need. And so we started developing it and getting ready to launch it. And then suddenly we were cancelled right out of the gate and thrust into this entire world where apparently men can be women. So in no way did we create it in response to what is happening. I didn't know about this. I'd never heard the word TERF before, like when I was first called.
You definitely have now.
But I had to look it up. And it never even occurred to me when we were developing the platform to go and be like, oh, should I just go and check if men are considered women in law? And what an irrational thought that would have been.
Yeah.
You would never even naturally have the thought. So yeah, that's basically how we came up with it. And,
was it basically like, I think of, when I think of the campaign for sex-based rights to be protected in the modern age, I think of Mumsnet. Now, I don't mean that I mean that in a positive way. I think it's great for women to have their own space in which they can share ideas as women, as mothers, as all the rest of it that comes with your immutable sex. And that's fantastic, but it's derided and mocked as being this sort of TERF hellhole. Do you think that's a sort of similar attempt that your platform was immediately smeared as?
I think so. I think there was sort of a few differences. I mean, Mumsnet, it's a little, I love it, but Mumsnet's a little bit more open in the sense that it's public. You can go and read it, whatnot. What we had, what was a very closed network. So women, unless you were a woman, you couldn't even get on. You couldn't see anything in it.
Yeah.
We had gatekeeping at the onboarding stage of it, so you could basically weed out men. And it was with AI. You take a selfie, the AI would say would sort of assess, because it can, like the good old fashioned human eye. They've basically made technology that replicates it, that can tell if someone's male or female, because it is incredibly obvious who is male and who is female. And then we also had humans behind the screens to back it up, because technology does make mistakes, and it did. I mean, men would get on and we would just remove them. And it's funny, when we were developing it, I actually didn't, the platform that I, in a sense, was using as some sort of inspiration wasn't anything else that was women only. It was Grindr.
Ah, yes.
For the reason that, when you have something that is for a specific demographic, whether it's gay men or women, it's called a niche social network. And so at the time, I didn't know that about gender ideology, so I didn't know that Grindr had actually opened itself up to identifies as a gay man. But it was sort of one of the first social networks for a specific demographic, and we were like, well, obviously this was needed for gay men, so let's make something that's needed exclusively for women.
Which is fair enough. And you went to court because Tickle passed this allegation. And then, well, it's not an allegation. I mean, it was true. Tickle was kicked off of Giggle for being a man, right? That's ultimately... Yeah. That's the crux of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the allegation that I got from when I got the first Australian Human Rights Commission complaint from him was gender identity discrimination. But and I don't even remember removing him, because men did get on and we just removed them, and he was just one of them. So, I mean, I don't even know when it would have happened. But it wasn't about gender identity, sorry. It was about his maleness. Obviously a male, and he was removed on the basis of being male. He wasn't removed on the basis of being trans. So to even say that it was gender identity discrimination is wrong. If you were to say anything, classified as anything, it was sex discrimination, but it was lawful sex discrimination, because the Sex Discrimination Act did, when it was working properly, allowed for women-only spaces, and you could remove a male person from them.
Now, the ruling that you received basically said, quite shockingly, as I said at the start there, that sex is changeable, right? Now, that is disturbing, what has been considered fact and truth for quite some time now. First of all, what do you make of that ruling ultimately? And secondly, in this country, even the Labour Party have stopped being so utterly deranged on this issue and have accepted sex-based rights and sex-based definitions, and that actually the Equality Act protects gender-critical views and all these other things. So we in this country, which is not the same in many other walks of life, by the way. In Australia, you are not as far gone as we are in so many respects. I could list a whole load. But is Anthony Albanese and the Labour Party over there, are they just totally lost on this issue? Has the culture war not been won there?
Oh, they're completely lost on this issue. What's happening in Australia at the moment is extreme censorship and political cowardice. So we have a federal election coming up within the next few months. It hasn't been established exactly when it will happen. It hasn't been called yet, but it will be very soon. And it appears both sides, the current government, which is the Albanese's Labor government, and then the opposition, which is Peter Dutton's Liberal Party, have no interest in taking up this issue. Just the other day, the current health minister, when asked about men and women's sports, just said, "Oh, there's no issue." You're like, but there is an issue, because I'm in court. And if there's no issue, we'll let the Australian Human Rights Commission know and stop dragging women through court, and let us have women-only spaces and women-only sport. But if you're not going to do that, then there is an issue. So, I mean, it's very, very frustrating. And it's one of my objectives at the moment is to put pressure on politicians to acknowledge reality, acknowledge that there is an issue, and actually do something about it. Because in Australia, the Sex Discrimination Act was actually changed in 2013 under Julia Gillard's Labor government.
Oh, dear.
Where gender identity was put into the Sex Discrimination Act, and the definitions of man and woman were removed. That's what created this whole mess. And legislators could actually fix this in a week, in a day, for free. But instead, I have to, work tirelessly every day to raise what is effectively going to be over $1 million by the end of this, to fight it out in the courts. to
Wow.
one so that I can move on with my life and not be accused of any form of discrimination, and run an app for women, but also get these amendments repealed. But if they were actually doing their job, they could just do it.
So, this ultimately then isn't about you, not really, right? This is about all Australian women, and actually the fight for truth and fact, for reality. Because it strikes me that this is a deeply ideological attack on you, right? That Roxanne Tickle isn't just suing. You've now revealed that actually he's coming after you for legal costs. If you lose, you'll of course be forced to pay his legal fees. Costs is what it's called in the legal trade. Now, for you personally, I don't know your financial situation, but it's going to be a pretty big deal, right?
Yeah, I mean, like most people, I don't have millions of dollars just sitting around, especially just to pay for someone else's legal fees. No, I mean, we were always told throughout this process that his legal representation was pro bono. He had received a $50,000 grant from the Grata Fund, which is sort of a social justice sort of fund in Australia. But now in this latest round in the appeal, they have decided and admitted that because I actually have been successful in crowdfunding the money, they want a piece of it. Yeah. And they want me to be able to pay his costs in the event that he wins in the next round. And the thing is that this is public interest litigation. I'm in a rights fight here. I want to, it's not just my own, as you said, it's all women's rights, but it's actually all citizens' rights, because I actually think that men, one, should also be able to have male-only spaces, but two, should also be able to acknowledge a man when they see one and not be forced to say that that's a woman. So everyone is actually impacted by this. But the other side, so I don't want to bankrupt him. No. Go and live your life. I wish you well. If you want to call yourself a woman, if you want to wear women's clothes, I really actually don't care that much. Yeah. I don't want to destroy your life. I'm here just to get women's rights back on track. The other side appears to want to punish me for successfully defending myself.
And is this
which raising the money?
Has this? I mean, I completely agree with everything that you're doing, and my heart, as I said to you off air, my heart goes out to you. I think you're a total hero and a force of nature. But it's all right for me to say this as a British gay man, but are there any feminist organisations or women's rights groups in Australia that have actually come out in a major way to actually support your case, or is there an element of real intellectual cowardice there?
Oh, I mean, we definitely have some. So we've got Women's Forum Australia, which is run by Rachel Wong, which is just amazing. We've also Lesbian Action Group, which is another organisation in Australia that had applied to the Australian Human Rights Commission to have an exemption so they could have female-only lesbian events like there's any other kind. They were told no. So they have been incredibly supportive. But when you go to, say, sort of the more media-driven things, no. I mean, before we launched Giggle, when we were getting ready to launch, we never actually even got to properly launch it in any real way. We just had to sort of run with everything that was going on. But before it all happened, before I'd even been called transphobic, there's this media platform in Australia called Mamma Mia, and it sort of describes itself as Australia's largest woman media publication for women or something. And it's sort of like online news, and it's all very woman-centric. And they were so supportive, like, this is a slam dunk, this is a brilliant idea, we can't wait for this to be out, we're going to support you. The moment I was called transphobic, they've never once responded to an email from me again. And I mean, I've sent so many emails to them over the years. I sort of stopped doing it because I was like, I felt you feel pathetic after a while. But
no, they should feel pathetic, not you.
No, I agree. And I also wanted the receipts that I was like, no, I emailed you at every single thing. I kept you up to date. I really did try to build a relationship with you, but they will not speak to me. And it's like, well, you've built your entire platform of knowing what a woman is, because I don't think 15 years ago or whatever, you were sitting there going, oh, definitely men or women. But now that there has been this sort of like bizarre cultural zeitgeist of it, they sort of went in that direction. And I find it unforgivable.
Yes. So for a British audience watching, right, I would argue that Julia Gillard is a progressive prat, right? And I think that there is an element here, a bit like Penny Mordaunt, who was a minister here in our country, and she stood up at the dispatch box in Parliament in the House of Commons, and she said. She stood up and said trans women are women at the dispatch box, making a really, really public statement on camera, of course, and that went out, and they said self-identification is coming in. You can be whatever you want, call yourself whatever you want. And that had real ramifications for the Conservative Party and, of course, for legal fights. Maya Forstater, who I know you're aware of totally, and she won, of course, that really landmark case establishing rights and protections under the Equality Act. Now, where we're at here with the Sex Discrimination Act and the what I call the progressive prats is that they've put forward a piece of legislation and thought, aren't we worthy, aren't we good? And then it's had really wide ramifications, a bit like standing at a dispatch box and saying, trans women are women, and not thinking through the consequences. But there is still this moral cowardice, isn't there, that says they're not willing to actually make an admission that they've made a mistake for fear of being called transphobic.
100%. I mean, when under Julia Gillard's government, when these amendments happened, it was the Attorney General at the time was a man named Mark Dreyfus, and he was very instrumental in getting gender identity into the Sex Discrimination Act. And because we have a Labour government again, it just so happens he's again right now the Attorney General. And so, I mean, do I think that this man will ever admit that he got it wrong? No. We all know he did. It's blatantly obvious. And looking back, when you can go and research the history of it, they didn't think about women at all when they did this. And you go, well, were they malicious or were they incompetent? Because as legislators, their job is actually to think of all of the different possibilities that can happen from legislation. I actually think that they were malicious. Mm-hmm. If they had just put in gender identity into the Sex Discrimination Act, you'd go, okay, maybe that was a little bit of a mistake. They just thought that it would work, and that just every now and then, like on the basis of gender identity, if there was a situation that was very removed from sex, I don't know what it would be, but let's just say that you could think of something, that there would be a protection there. But because they removed the definitions of man and woman, that makes me think that they knew exactly what they were doing. And so, again, I mean, it has to be fixed.
Is there a history of the Attorney General having a history of this kind of activism?
I mean, I've not paid much more attention to him, to be honest, because of anything else that he's done, because I don't care about anything else he's done. This is enough for me.
Indeed.
To judge single thing about him. And no, I mean, he's someone who if the few times where he has sort of made a comment about the culture war, as they would call it, basically maintains that there's no problem.
Yeah, so dismisses it outright. Well, speaking of dismissing it outright then, I want you to tell me, were you to speak to the Attorney General right now, he would argue that actually what he's done is in the name of equality. Well, actually, I would argue, Sal, that you have been subject to the rank misogyny of the worst kind and actually bullying on an industrial scale. And I hope that, you would be able to look him in the eye and tell him that, because he would deserve to hear it.
I'd tell him a bit more.
Yeah, I bet.
I have played the conversation in my head. It's a big shower thoughts moment. No, without a doubt. I mean, the thing is that gender identity doesn't create less discrimination; it creates more, because when you're going to give men a privilege on the basis of gender identity, you're actually discriminating against women on the basis of sex. So with gender ideology, actually everything about it, every claim that's made, everything that happens, the exact opposite is always true. And so with this one, you can prove it here too. The person being discriminated against is me.
Yes.
On the basis of sex. Vilified as well on the basis of sex. And it's sometimes psychologically hard to cope with that, in the sense that you sit there going, I'm being punished for discrimination when I'm the one being discriminated against.
What would your, you didn't expect yourself to be in this position, right? You've articulated that. What would your message be to young women who think, well, I don't want what happened to Sal to happen to me? Sal's life has been turned upside down. She may face, imminent multi-million dollar bill. I'm in the wrong currency, and therefore I don't want to put my head above the parapet. You just said, without speaking out of turn, you just met Connie Shaw, we have on this channel, great girl, and she herself, a young student, she's only 20, and she had her life impacted because she said basically that, sex is immutable and all these other things, and that you can't change your sex. And she was told as a student that she couldn't have a debating platform because she had the incorrect view on this very issue. So what would your message be to young women like that, who are looking at what's happening to women like yourself and thinking, I'm far too scared to voice what used to be thought of as a common sense view?
Yeah, I met Connie yesterday for the first time. I've been a fan of hers for the last few months since she was brought to my attention. And she's absolutely brilliant.
She's superb, yeah.
Gorgeous as well. She's just fantastic. I didn't realize until recently that it was reading about Tickle v Giggle is what, as we say, piqued her and made her go and research what was going on, because like any other rational person, she saw a picture of him and saw a man.
Yes.
And went, not a woman, so let's find out what's going on here. And so I met her yesterday because we had an event at the House of Lords and I invited her to come. And we talked about it a lot, about young women and who might be scared. And I understand why they would be. It's rational. It's survival instinct. If you're seeing what's happening to the women speaking out, you think, well, I'm going to protect myself. I don't want that to happen. In the event that you can't speak out because it actually would damage your life, I do understand that. What the best thing you can do then is support the women who are.
Mm-hmm.
And you can or you can take the risk. I personally think that even if there is great cost, you take the risk. I mean, every single right we had, it took women taking the risk to get it. We were handed nothing.
Yeah.
We weren't even handed the right to vote. And even with if you look at the right to vote, there were even women then that were, say, against women getting the right to vote. Women have always fought for our rights in the face of opposition from a lot of men and just far too many women. But then we eventually fight hard enough when we get them. So I think you just have to sit there and ask yourself, what would I have done in that situation? Would I have just not accepted, just accepted being a complete second-class citizen? Ask yourself now, I couldn't sit back. I mean,
No.
In AHRC days, I mean, I could have just given in to all of the demands, but I mean, how do I sleep at night? How do I look at myself in the mirror? How do I look at my daughter? I have a 2.5-year-old daughter. How do I look at her in the eye and tell her to be strong and determined in life if I gave up when something was scary or got too hard? I mean, life is sort of just not just, it's a test to see how you react to some of these things.
And also, if this is allowed to mothball, your daughter's life is going to be severely impacted through policy.
100%. I can't send my daughter out into the world where she has no rights. She has to be able to say no to a man no matter what he thinks about himself.
Mm-hmm.
We all do.
Which goes back to the Me Too movement, really, right? So progressives have done a sort of reverse ferret where, we all came out and said #MeToo and all this other stuff, and Harvey Weinstein is an odious pig and this other mantra. And now we're saying, shut your mouth, bitch. You don't deserve to have an opinion. I can't think of how these two things are remotely compatible.
I have a theory. I think that there was a lot of people who didn't want the Me Too movement to happen, and there were some crazy elements to it. Don't get me wrong. Like I will sit there and have conversations about and criticize Me Too along with everybody else. But the core principle of it was incredibly important, and it was a grassroots movement of women that was getting a lot of traction. I don't think that it's any coincidence that a movement of women having boundaries was very quickly replaced by a woman having boundaries as a bigot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's a lot of powerful people in media, in politics, fields like that, who really didn't want to get, let's say, Me Too'd and took it away as quickly as possible,
right.
and found a way to silence any woman who actually does care about boundaries and safeguarding and reality and facts.
Will Giggle ever launch?
Yes, 100%. Oh gosh, yeah, 100%. I mean, while obviously I'm doing this because I want rights in general, I do always remember like the first principle of how I got here. And I'm not giving up. I think actually, if anything, female-only spaces have become more important since I first had the idea. I mean, they weren't front page news in any way, shape, or form. I didn't know that they were controversial. I mean, female spaces everywhere at one point. And male-only, I just didn't think that this was controversial at all. And so, yeah, no, definitely. We will definitely be relaunching, and it will be very exciting when we do. I can't wait till my days are filled with just actually running a woman-only app rather than having to, I don't know, walk around and tell people what a woman is while holding like a paper cup, saying, "Please give me money." Like you feel like a crazy person.
No, it needs to happen. It's so important. Speaking of that appeal, then that you are raising funds for, what is the latest on both of those things, as in the appeal and the fund itself? What arguments are being put forward in the appeal, and when can we expect the appeal to take place?
So we actually had the first case management hearing for it yesterday. And then so the next time we're in court, it's called an interlocutory hearing, which will be on the 7th of April. And that's when they're going to talk about costs. Right. It's going to be fought then. Also, there's a few different organizations that want to intervene. So, for example, the Australian Human Rights Commission wants to intervene again on Tickle's side, on the side of gender identity. The Australian Christian Lobby has applied to intervene on my side, as hopefully the Lesbian Action Group will also be doing that. So, sort of these strange bedfellows of who sort of the Christians, the lesbians, we're all coming together for the greater cause of women's rights and reality. And the hearing itself will be in August. Then we'll probably get a decision, hopefully by the end of the year. And then the next stage is the High Court. So we've always known that this case will probably go to the High Court. So if I lose this round, which I really hope I don't, but if I do, I will be the one taking it to the High Court. If I win this round, I fully expect the other side would take it to the High Court. Mm-hmm. So I'm prepared for that. I know that I'm just midway through the marathon, basically. And so for anyone who does want information about like the legal arguments or the laws, or just to understand it more, it is at the crowdfund. So gigglecrowdfund.com. There's all information about it, news. I mean, any updates, we update after there are hearings, because on a day-to-day basis, obviously there's nothing specific. I mean, we don't sit there and do updates like another legal letter was sent. We're not that good with the updates. But when there are big things that do happen, we update everybody. And it's just, I mean, I've said from day one, I'll fight this till the end.
And
I will win. By the end, I think I will win.
An international audience can make a donation.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I was able to do the first round, which was just over $500,000, from the kindness and support of people from all over the world who either care about women's rights or free speech, freedom of belief, just reality of just don't want to live in like some sort of bizarre version of Orwell's 1984. And so I'm so grateful. I will be grateful for the rest of my life. And all I can say to repay everybody is that I will never, ever give up.
Beautifully said. I wish you all the very best. I really do. Best of luck. And you deserve all of that and more. So I'm so pleased that people are seeing this and actually being supportive of it, because it's not just, as we've said, it's not just about you. It's not just about women. This is actually about where we're at in the Western world, I would argue. It's sort of civilizational.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. If the state can make you accept men as women, well, they can force you to accept anything, can't they? What's next? Where does it go from there? I mean, you have to be able to have, your freedom of belief, freedom of mind, freedom of speech, freedom of association. These are all like the foundations of a healthy and liberal society, and they are at what is at stake, and we have to fight for them. Unfortunately, but we have to fight for them.
Indeed. Right, Sal, that website again, give it one more time.
gigglecrowdfund.com.
Perfect. Sal, best of luck. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.